Welcome to Depth of Field, an independent filmmaking podcast hosted by Dr. Mike White and Shelby Hagerden, independent filmmakers and industry professionals. Episodes will touch on recent films, the state of the industry, the regional scene in Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota, the occasional gear discussion, and interviews. Stay up to date with our current episodes on Spotify and YouTube.
Welcome to the Depth of Field podcast for the week of March 7th, 2024. I'm Mike White.
And I am Shelby Hagerden.
If you're not familiar with Depth of Field, our podcast covers Iowa and Nebraska and South Dakota independent filmmaking scene, as well as we do some regional, national, and even this week some international news that's going on, and specifically in independent film. Mm-hmm. So this week we're going to cover a few things. First of all, we're going to have some highlights from the Independent Spirit Awards. Yeah. So, and we hosted a party.
We did.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Yeah, we had a film independent party with our film crew that we usually work with. Yep. We invited everybody over and we had dinner, and then we watched the Independent Spirit Awards, and it was super fun. Yep. So we had a really great time. Also, we're going to talk about the death of David Bordwell. I did not know David Bordwell had been ill, but he had passed away. He was a really important film theorist that many of you might be aware of and weren't aware that you are. And then also, we're going to talk about some changes in leadership at both Disney and Netflix. Mm-hmm. And you're probably thinking, those are big companies, but these changes will impact the independent filmmakers. Also, in our local scene, we have a really great interview with Stacy Heatherly of the Eastern Nebraska Film Office about the Nebraska Film Tax Incentive.
That's true.
So, first of all, I think we're going to start with the Independent Spirit Awards. What'd you think of them this year?
Oh, they were wonderful. They're great every year.
I can honestly say I didn't feel like any of the awards were like misplaced. I agreed with every award that was given.
I almost predicted every single one.
Yeah, so I think we'll go down, and Shelby, if you want to start with the first one, we'll talk about a few winners.
I was really
And
excited.
this is not all of them.
Yes, it's just select.
Because we'd be here all night, so, okay.
We'd be there for the whole
show.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So, starting with the best supporting performance, I was so excited about this. From the holdovers, we got Divine Joy Randolph. I love her.
From the holdovers.
I said that.
Okay. from Alexander Payne's fantastic film.
Yes.
She is sweeping it. I think she has won Best Supporting Performance everywhere for this. She has been absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And it was really interesting. I just listened to the IndieWire podcast this morning, and they were saying that they feel like that she carried that film. She was the glue that held it together. So I would agree with that.
I would agree with that. She's a wonderful performance.
The best international film, this is an award given to the director, was Anatomy of a Fall. This is a French film by Justine Triet. I was so excited to see this win. Triet is a fantastic filmmaker. I don't think this was a surprise to anybody.
And this is actually going to be coming out, if anybody hasn't seen this yet. It's going to be on Hulu at the end of March.
And Shelby knows where everything is screening.
Yes.
So Hulu.
Holdovers is already out. You can watch it on Peacock.
Okay. And next one.
Best first screenplay. This is the one that I think caught me the most by surprise. This went to Sammy Birch for May December. I
had no idea this was a first-time filmmaker. Or not filmmaker, but screenwriter.
Technically it wasn't, because if you go back, one of her first screenplays was actually the Coyote versus Acme versus Coyote. What was that?
I don't know.
The one that got canceled. The one that's been all sorts of... Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the film that actually got canceled last summer, got made, and then they just scrapped it. That was her very first screenplay.
Yep, and because
it was scrapped, this is technically...
There was no distribution,
yes.
So this is... Okay, yep. That's great. Thanks for the insight on that. Best screenplay went to Cord Jefferson for American Fiction. Shelby was rooting for Cord.
Oh, yeah. Love Cord.
I think we all stood up and cheered when Cord won. So that was really exciting, because obviously Shelby knows Cord, so was really totally cool.
And going back to May December is on Netflix right now. American Fiction, you can still buy and or rent. I think it's just buying right now on Amazon. So I don't think they have like their official screen.
I don't know where their platform for streaming is as of yet. Is that where? Okay.
Yep.
That'll be interesting. I know it's got distribution, but I'm not sure about the streaming platform.
Yes.
So I don't know. Maybe they're still playing out their theatrical. Maybe it's a long run.
Possibly.
Possibly.
We'll see.
I know I saw it still playing in Sioux Falls this past weekend. Best cinematography.
Yes, if that went to, and I'm gonna feel awful if this is pronounced wrong, but Egil Brild. Egil Brild. It's a Danish cinematographer. It's a Danish name, and he was cinematographer for The Holdovers.
Now he's got a really super extensive television background. He had done another film with Alexander Payne, and I can't remember which one it is, but they had worked together before. And they've got a long-standing relationship, and he is fantastic.
And definitely a well-earned award.
The Someone to Watch award is one of the sponsored awards from Film Independent. That award was from Stella Artois, the beer company. It recognizes a talented filmmaker who has what they call a singular or unique vision. And this year it was Monica Sorrell. Okay. The film is called Mountains, but the thing about this is if you look at the bio for Monica Sorrell, this is a crazy impressive person. She's a Haitian-American filmmaker, but she originally came to the U.S. She went to the University of Central Florida to their film program. But a lot of her films are about like displacement or alienation. A lot of it about preserving cultural tradition, those types of things. Her debut film, her feature, Mountains, just came out this past year, but it premiered at Tribeca. It had a special jury mention. It was in the U.S. narrative feature competition there. It also was at the Toronto International Film Festival. And it's just, I could go on all day about her, and really so deservedly won this film. I was not aware of her until this win. And then after I went and Googled who she is, she's got a really good website, a personal website with tons of information. So if you have a chance, look her up. And again, her name is Monica Sorrell.
Going then to the best breakthrough performance, we were rooting for him, Dominic Sessa. From The Holdovers, who came out of nowhere. We've chatted about him before.
Yeah. If you're interested, you can check out episode 1.
Yes.
And we have a really big deep dive into Dominic Sessa in episode 1. The award that... there are two major awards there. There is the Altman, and then there is the Cassavetes. The Altman really is an award for the director, the casting director, and the ensemble cast. It's kind of like their version almost of a casting award. And this film went to Showing Up by Kelly Reichard. The casting director was Gail Kenner, who I don't know a lot about, but it had a fantastic cast, and I won't list everyone here, but if you're really interested in that, you should definitely look up the Altman Award and everyone that was on the cast. We're going to have a long episode today, so we're not going to go through the whole list.
And definitely check out Showing Up. I think it's on Max, but I could be wrong.
I'm not sure.
But definitely watch Showing Up. It's wonderful. I got to see it in theaters last year. It really is something special. It feels like you're just friends with everyone while you're watching it. It's really great. Best first feature then. So this one went to 1001 for director A.V. Rockwell. So this is an award given to the director and producer. So the director, A.V. Rockwell, and then we have a nice long list of producers. Again, we won't go through all of them. But yeah, I'm not sure where this one is streaming right now either.
I'm not sure.
Or if it has distribution, but of course, best first feature. So.
And I don't know if it has distribution either. I think it was a smaller picture. The thing you have to understand about Film Independent is it's a little bit different because it's not a jury of judges. It is the members that vote. And this is why we're so interested in it. And it's not a film I don't think either of us know much about. But when it's available, typically the ones that win Best First Feature go on to be something big. So definitely keep an eye out. The award that, of all of the awards in all of film that a person could win, this is the award I would like to win more than any. To me, I would rather win this award than the Oscar.
And which award is that?
It's the Cassavetes Award. And the Cassavetes Award is a unique award. It's for the best feature film made for under $1 million. It's given to the writer, director, and producer. And this year, the film was Fremont. And the film was by Babak Jalali. And it was written by Carolina Cavalli. the film, I'll just give the log line. Danya works for a Chinese fortune cookie factory in San Francisco, formerly a translator for the U.S. military in Afghanistan, and she struggles to put her life back in order. In a moment of sudden revelation, she decides to send out a special message in a cookie. And this is shot in the most beautiful black and white you've ever seen. It's just so well assembled, and the voice is so unique and cool in this. It's just, absolutely fantastic. The type of film you'd think the Cassavetes would go to. Yeah, I mean, years ago, my friend Alexander Holdridge won it for In Search of a Midnight Kiss, and I'm so happy to call him my friend because I fanboyed out and he just responded, and we became friends after that. And I have an interview with him and stuff, and he's just such a cool guy. But it's that award and it's a career changing award for people. So I think it's really, really cool. Okay.
Awesome. This one I was really excited about, but Best Director went to Celine Song for Past Lives. And this was her first feature, and she won Best Director.
That's crazy. I was listening, Ann Thompson, who's probably one of the premier critics in the entire industry. That was her film this year. It was Past Lives. Everyone who's seen it, I've got a dear friend at the college who's a retired film criticism professor. And that was his film, Past Lives. Everyone who's really serious about criticism, that's their big film.
And it is not on streaming yet, but supposedly there's rumblings that it's going to be on Hulu. So wait for that.
And I know we had promised to do a review of it, but it's so hard to get to. We tried really hard. There was one screening in Sioux Falls, which is an hour and 15 minutes away. And it was like 4 p.m. on a Sunday. And it was really difficult to try to get to it. And we've had a heck of a time trying to get to it. Living here is tough because it's tough to get to films.
But once it comes, we'll do a review.
Best lead performance went to the great Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction.
Deservedly so.
Yeah, and he's absolutely dynamite in this film. And I love this picture. It was probably my favorite film of last year. And it's just beautiful New York voice, and he's just absolute dynamite in it. Again, we covered this film in episode 1, so if you want to hear us talk about how much we love the film, episode 1.
And again, another big award for Past Lives. It went for Best Feature, which of course was given to the producers of the film. But yeah, Past Lives, Best Feature and Best Director for that one.
Yeah, and this was David Hinojosa, Pamela Koffler, and Christine Vahan for that. So it's just absolutely terrific. Okay, well that kind of sums up that section of the show. I think I want to talk about David Bordwell a little bit. And for people who don't know, if you have ever taken a film criticism course, there are really 2 books. There is Looking at Movies, which is a very popular contemporary book. And the other book is called Film Art.
Yes.
And Film Art really focuses on the aesthetic of film, the auteur theory of film, and David Bordwell wrote that book. He wrote the first version in 1973 and had regular revisions. It's a beautiful book. I have taught it in my classes. And if you have taken film criticism in the past 35 years, it is very likely you might have had Film Art as your textbook. He was a professor at UW-Madison, and one of the things about Madison is they have a really strong film theory program. And for people who don't know, film programs are usually production or their theory. We have a unique animal at Wayne State where I teach where it's production and theory. But most schools are really focused in one area. And they have a really strong theory program. And he did that till he retired in 2004. But he continued working on the book as an emeritus professor. And he did it, right up till he died, basically. Damien Chazelle, who won the Oscar and directed La La Land, he said he learned more about film from reading Bordwell than any other writer. And it was a really surprising thing. It caught me off guard. So, I don't know. Shelby?
I mean, I love Film Art. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful book. I think Bordwell was a special talent with encyclopedic knowledge.
He was a brilliant guy. It was, whenever you saw him interviewed, it was kind of scary that one human being knows this much about film. And he did. He had an encyclopedic, memory. And I think this was just something that came from his obituary. He co-authored and edited 22 books and monographs and 140 journal articles and book chapters. That doesn't include like small reviews he did and other things. He just spent his entire life dedicated to film education. And I was really sad. The first thing I thought was, what the heck happens to film art? Because it's such a mainstay. Yeah. I have a copy of the latest edition that I was a third of the way through, and I'm still working on it. So it's just absolutely brilliant. So anyway. Well, let's move on. What's next on the docket, Shelby?
So the next big thing, getting into some industry news, the changes at Disney and 20th Century Studios. This is big. So David Greenbaum is moving from Fox Searchlight to Disney.
Okay. That feels like a weird fit.
Yes. But it's such a smart fit because Disney's been having a lot of issues lately because, they're doing a lot of the remakes, they're doing the live action remakes.
Yeah.
And they're looking for original content,
yeah.
which Fox Searchlight has been great at.
Well, and I think if we take a look at him, he's kind of half of... Okay, Fox Searchlight had what they called the Greens. Mm-hmm. And there were two people there. There was Matthew Greenfield and then, of course, David Greenbaum. And they were responsible for this. Now, you have to remember, Searchlight, one of the things they do is they seek out great independent film projects for distribution. And so that means it's all original content. Where Disney has really, especially their model currently, has really been... Let's go ahead and milk our existing IPs or IPs that we acquire to go ahead and do this. And the only problem is you can beat them to death. I mean, the trend is Marvel is starting to fizzle. I know that's tough for people to hear, but Marvel's starting to fizzle. They're not getting the deliveries. People are getting kind of exhausted by it. Star Wars, doing great in television, but in the cinema, not so much.
People are hungry for something new.
Yeah, and right now, it appears that Disney wants to go in a different direction and maybe have some other things. So something about Greenbaum that I think is interesting is he was responsible for a bunch of projects. So, yes. I mean, Shelby, what kind of stuff did he work on?
Yeah, just going through this, he's had a lot of success. He's helped guide dozens of feature films, including the Academy Award winners The Shape of Water and Nomadland, which obviously fantastic films.
Shot in Nebraska, much of it.
Yep. Also, Nomadland. And then also was very important in getting Poor Things created as well, which of course is up for the Academy Award at the moment. He was also responsible for making of The Menu, The Favorite, Grand Budapest Hotel, Black Swan, incredibly important films that work with a lot of independent filmmakers. So there's a lot of independent filmmakers that are feeling very positively about this move because I think maybe they could bring some independent cinema to Disney.
And he is replacing Sean Bailey. And Sean Bailey, nobody quite knows where he's going. He's just kind of resigned at this point. But one of the things with him is that he did do a lot of the stuff. He was really more responsible for like a lot of the live action. My understanding is a lot of the live action remakes of Disney properties. So this means that Disney is looking to adapt and basically maybe looking down the road, I would suppose, at maybe some different type of direction.
It was a really unexpected shakeup because Sean Bailey wasn't supposed to leave Disney until 2025.
Yeah. So
it's moving quickly.
Yeah.
Faster than people imagined.
With that being said, Netflix had a big change.
Yes.
And what was that?
So Dan Lin is replacing Scott Stuber as top film executive at Netflix. So Scott Stuber was the head of Netflix for 7 years, but announced last month that he was leaving. Dan Lin, though, is coming from... He has been really important with Rideback Productions. So Rideback Productions has been great. They did the Sherlock Holmes films. I think they were in charge of... oh, God. No, I can't remember. The Lego movies as well. They've done a really good job of taking IPs and making smaller IPs.
Yeah.
And making them into something really big. They're kind of doing... It seems like Netflix right now is doing a bit of the opposite of what Disney is proposing.
Their model is changing.
Yes.
I think for people who remember Netflix in its early stages, Netflix was a great buyer.
Yeah.
They would go to like Sundance and they were great at purchasing, and that changed quite a bit to pre-funding. And you see a lot of people with pre-funding deals, and we've mentioned that before. People like Noah Baumbach, they have pre-funded deals. I believe they even funded one of Martin Scorsese's films. I think they funded The Irishman in advance. They did some pre-funding. Where that fits is interesting, but Netflix with Dan Lin coming on really made the point that, hey, listen, we're not a theatrical distributor. We're streaming first. And Dan Lin is really known as a budget guy. Yes. I mean, he is known as being frugal with purchasing. I don't know what that means for Netflix. I don't know if that means they're going to be buying more, high quality, smaller productions or pre-funding standout directors. I'm not sure what that means. But also one of the things like with Scott Stuber leaving, Stuber was a big player. I mean, he had brought Martin Scorsese, Alfonso Cuarón, Jane Campion. They had a lot of Oscar nods and stuff. Red Notice, The Gray Man. There was a couple things that came in that were trounced by critics, but they performed well in the service, so it's just kind of difficult to know. But Dan Lin's not really a stranger to Netflix. I mean, I think he came in and did some work there. I think my daughter was just watching one of them.
The Avatar series is Dan's. So I think it's going to be a really interesting thing to see exactly...
Well, he also did The Two Popes, and that's dynamite. That's so good.
I think we're going to see something interesting. I think the world of IPs is definitely going to shift. I think we're going to start seeing smaller IPs become really important. I'm seeing a lot of book adaptations, a lot of going back and seeing things that maybe have failed in the past and trying to, bring a little bit more life into them. I think it's going to be interesting.
Well, and we went to the movie. We went to go see Dune, of course, like everybody did. But we went to go see it, and then when we did, man, every trailer was basically a remake of an existing IP or another. And I get exhausted by that. Well, I'm so tired. How many Ghostbusters movies do we need? And I know people love it, and I don't mean to be critical if you love it, but I mean, we need original content.
Well, and if we do want to go back, and if we want to work with IPs, if that's what your goal is, pick something that hasn't been done a million times yet. We've seen a lot of Ghostbusters movies. We've seen how many Godzilla versus Kong movies. Mm-hmm. We can go into something a little bit new. I mean, video games are hot territory right now. We've got the Borderlands video game. That just came out. The film that was just announced for that. I mean, we've got some great IPs that haven't really been milked yet. And I think we're going to start seeing that with Dan Lin. Well,
and I think Netflix has the same problem everybody has. I mean, they've got to try to outbid their competitors. And you've got some folks that they're strong. Yeah. I mean, you've got Peacock now. You've got, I don't think HBO Max is quite what they were. They called Max now, but man, for a while they were unstoppable.
They're still getting some of the best films.
Yeah, so I mean, Netflix, it's a bidding war basically on projects, and those big commercial projects are tough to get. So a lot of it is, you go back, and I remember seeing films on Netflix that were inexpensive films that people purchased at festivals, and now they're shooting for those big blockbuster type films, and it is tough. It's a tough business. So it's interesting. Okay. Well, let's talk about the Berlin Film Festival. This is our quick piece of international news. Yes. We're going to get to this. So, Shelby, what's going on in Berlin?
Okay, well, let's first go through what exactly is the Berlin Film Festival. So it's one of the top three. And of the big three film festivals in the world, you have Venice and you have Cannes. So Berlin is happening first, then you'll have Venice, then you have Cannes. Yeah. And Berlin really sets the tone, typically, for what your year-end festivals is going to look like.
And typically called the Berlinale. Yes. This was founded in 1951. It's an older festival. It came after fascism, right, in Germany.
But unfortunately, we're seeing the effects of fascism this year.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of far-right conservative politics in Germany that are starting to affect the festival as that goes. But in 2019, Mariette Reisenbeek and then Carlo Chitrain took over the festival. And there are people who think they've just done a fantastic job. And then there are some folks, the New York Times was a little tough on them. New York Times had kind of a scathing, maybe scathing's not the right word, but I feel like it was a critical article, I think, of the two of them. Yeah. What was unique in 2019 is usually there's one director, but they brought in Reisenbeek to basically go ahead and do the financial part. And then Chitrain went ahead and did kind of the creative programming, which was great. So you had somebody who could really work on that. The festival felt that that wasn't a good thing, that they should go back to a single artistic director, which is fine. They went ahead and did that, but it ended up being not popular with the filmmakers.
Yes. See, part of this problem is they don't want to have, you have kind of a rising trend of fascism within Germany. And we've got a lot of people on that side that are supporting that decision to have this singular leader at Berlin. On the other hand, though, you have a lot of filmmakers that are very upset with this decision about having the singular art director within there. So you have, looking at this, some of the filmmakers that have gone against this. After 200 film professionals signed an open letter protesting the invitations, they have defended the decision by emphasizing that the tickets have been distributed among lawmakers from elected parties in Berlin's legislature. And some of the people that have gone against this, I mean, Scorsese has been against it. You've got Claire Denis has been against it. It's a difficult thing because we also haven't seen a lot of filmmakers move out of the festival either. Spoken against it, but aren't taking their films out of the fest.
One of the things they really want to do is they want to have a political influence on the festival.
Yeah.
Instead of letting the festival be what it is.
Well, and the festival should exist as its own entity.
It should be autonomous from that. But it is what it's going to be. Now, in December, Trisha Tuttle, strangely, is an American. Mm-hmm. Now, she had directed the London Film Festival. She's taking over the Berlinale.
Yes.
And then what happened was, there was, because of the war in Gaza, there has been a lot of critical things that have kind of happened. They had... in 2019, there was a parliamentary resolution there, and that was that they wanted to basically filter which voices could speak at the festival and which ones couldn't. And it ended up being, I don't know. I don't really know a delicate way to explain it.
I don't think there is a delicate way to explain it. You have an issue where... So currently, just for the background, so the war in Gaza, some artists have complained that Germany's overzealous implementation of the 2019 parliamentary resolution means that they face being shut out of state-funded institutions. So this is the main issue, because there are state-funded artistic institutions. They can't speak then openly about or against government officials or government policies because they don't want to fear the backlash from the government, obviously, if as filmmakers and artists trying to receive funding. This has given rise to the movement called Strike Germany, which, in the name of fighting censorship, urges artists to boycott cultural events.
Well, and it ended up being a big deal because 200 filmmakers signed an open letter protesting the invitations.
That's the big deal.
So I think...
But again, we're not really seeing many filmmakers removing their films.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one of the big three. It's a career-changing thing. So, I mean, I think the future of the Berlinale is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next year with it. But this is not unique. I mean, we've seen things like this. I know that, of course, there's the very famous protests that took place in France during the New Wave. There are the political nature of things affects these large European festivals.
Well, it really depends too. Like on these festivals, I mean, there were protests last year about Venice. There's a protest every single year at Cannes. Usually, I mean, for many years until her death, Agnes Varda was in charge of them. Mm-hmm. So it's not uncommon to see these types of protests.
Well, and then there was...
Well, for instance, there was a protest at Film Independence.
There was a pro-Palestinian protest outside of Film Independent.
They are, they're culturally significant events. I mean, as much as we want to say, oh, the awards don't matter, this is an objective piece of art, they do matter.
Yeah.
The awards do matter at the end of the day, and people recognize that because people want to protest them. They're that important.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that concludes our section on the Berlinale.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our interview.
For sure.
Okay, so for our next segment, we have Stacy Heatherly of the Eastern Nebraska Film Office. So, Stacy, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
We're really excited about this segment. As a matter of fact, you're our first interview segment on our show. But I did have somebody ask me, they said, hey, how come the Nebraska Film Office can go ahead and have like legislation? And I had to explain to them, I said, well, the Eastern Nebraska Film Office is really more of an advocacy group, right?
Yes. So we started, it's been, let's see, our office has been open for about 8 years now. And we started to really give a title to what we were doing because, as a lot of people know with this industry, that if they're like, who are you, what are you doing, so you have to have a title, you've got to have a mission. So we opened the office, wrote our mission statement, made it very clear. Our goal was to start a film incentive program in a rural community using former Senator Colby Coash's LB 863 and put that language in an LB 840 and then show other communities how to do it. So we're basically, that was one of our goals. The second goal was to bring films actually to Nebraska that students could get some real hands-on experience, because I would say back 10 years ago, it was really difficult for a student to get on a film and have real life experience. And it's very different when you're in a studio, when you're in theory, but once you're on a film set, everything changes. The world is different. And so we wanted students to have that real world experience. And as you guys know, our world changed in the 90s. When they started film incentives, production companies, all they wanted was the money. So if you had a tax incentive, then you would be a location for a film. And so Nebraska became kind of it's not that we didn't get films, because we did, and but we didn't get the big budget films that are attracted by film incentives. So having a small rural community film incentive, we had about $5 million, which isn't, it's not a small amount of money, but it's not a large amount of money either. But we would get films that our students could participate in and be interns on and do real career jobs, not getting coffee as an internship position. Yeah. Sometimes we've all kind of been there, so we know what that's like. But we gave them real hands-on experience. So Eastern Nebraska Film Office, as a mission statement, was to show rural communities how we could have film incentives locally on a small scale, have our students learn real hands-on experience. And so that was really our mission for advocacy. So Mike, when you say that, that's exactly what we do. We also feel like as a pilot program, we got to really see what a good fit for Nebraska is. And I don't want to jump ahead too much, so I'm just gonna stop there. And if I answered the question,
And I think too, especially as someone who is a professor and heading a film program in Nebraska, something, and I came back, for those who weren't aware, Shelby and I both went and testified, actually. And that was such an awesome experience. And when I got back to the college, people are asking, says, well, what does this really mean for the students? And I said, well, this is really a career altering thing for students. So I completely agree, with that. So Shelby, did you want to ask? Well, I think she probably covered the stuff on motivation.
I'd really like to know, let's go ahead and let's outline exactly what the film tax incentive does and kind of how it would work, so that way everybody kind of understands the same language.
Sure. So I took a few notes here because I want to be very specific. As we talked about a few minutes ago, back in the 90s, the world changed. Our film industry changed. Without a tax incentive for the state, we can't really attract really large budget films because they need that tax incentive money, to really offset expenses. So if we think about, what tax incentives were meant to be, they're supposed to benefit both the production company and the state where they're filming. So when we think about the tax incentive, we want to keep that in mind first. That's the first thing you have to think about is how can it benefit the state but also benefit the production company. You don't want, and I'm going to use this word because you guys know me, so we don't want to be self-serving. You know, we need to make sure that we're looking at both sides of this. Production companies need the incentives, the state needs the economic development, so what they get from that. So that's the first part of it. Also, you know, the better the film incentive, the more likely we're going to win the contract. We've all seen where films are filmed in a state where the story didn't originate, or they say this location, you know, but the movie says that it's at a different location. That's just how our industry works. But we want to attract them, so we want the best film incentive possible. So what that means is that we have to look at, you know, saving money on the taxes, local discounts, receiving cash backs. What does that look like? Is it in a form of a grant or a tax rebate, or is it a tax credit? So one of the things that we've done in Nebraska is this has been going on for a very long time. It's been a long conversation in Nebraska. And up until recently, we just haven't been successful. And I think part of that is that we have to, as Nebraskans, we have to match Nebraska. What does Nebraska want? What is important to us as citizens and residents of the state? So one of those is youth retention. So in the bill itself, we want to make sure that we are giving our Nebraska youth who graduate in this state an opportunity to work on the films. And so we make the percentage of crew hired large. So we take, you know, if you look through all the states that have incentives, what our team did was we went through, we studied every one of these incentives, and we said, what makes sense for Nebraska? And we're kind of lucky because we're one of the later states to really come in on this conversation seriously. So we've seen what other states have done, and we see what works, and we see what doesn't work, and we see what they're rewriting now. Several states are rewriting their bills, and fortunately, we've already learned. So the things that they're doing now, we've already written in our bill. So as a tax incentive itself, tax credit, we just want to make sure that we're fair to the production company, we're fair to the state, we recognize our purpose, which is youth retention, tax base, and you know, I would say that grants, I think both of you have read the incentive bill, we put a grant in there because we want our younger people to be able to make movies in Nebraska too. And they don't always qualify for these big tax credits. They're not there yet. So we want to write a grant into that bill that gives our young people an opportunity to make a film in Nebraska and to start building their resumes. We also have a grant opportunity within the bill for our tribal communities, our tribes that want education. I was invited to an intertribal council meeting, and we were just having a conversation. You know, do they want to have a credit? Do they want to bring production to the reservations or the communities? And the answer was they would rather have education, which makes really good sense because one of our mission at Eastern Nebraska Film Office is that we've been working with the United States, the tribes within the United States, to help bring film offices to the reservations and to the tribes. And then they have say over their content. They have say of how much the production is shot there and what happens during those shoots, because right now that's not how it works in most states. So we really tried to look at Nebraska and say, you know, what's important to the state of Nebraska, what's important to our young people, and how do we benefit the kids that are, I say kids, but young people that are moving out of our state and try to retain them. So those are kind of the pieces of the tax incentive and what the purpose is for them.
Well, and I don't know if people really realize how much of an impact it really has. I know about 4 years ago, Shelby and I were in a meeting where there were two producers from out of state that were looking at Nebraska, but they kept talking about other places. Because, I mean, really, Nebraska versus Kansas, how different does some of that look?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and if somebody can give them a financial incentive, they're going to go where they're going to go where they can produce. I mean, Shelby and I are guilty of it too. I mean, like when we produce a film, we're on Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. I mean, it's wherever we can kind of get the film made. As much as, you know, I love Nebraska because I teach there and I also live in Iowa. I mean, it's a lot of times it's bigger than that, because if you just can't afford it, you just can't afford it. And I completely agree with that, you know, from that standpoint. We talked a lot about, you know, Nebraska and a few of the other places. And I think you might have covered it a little bit, but specifically, why do you feel like the incentive is such a good fit for Nebraska?
I feel like the time is really, really right. I feel like as a state, we recognize that youth retention all over the state is important. Mike, you're from Iowa. I'm from Iowa originally. And if I look at communities around me where I grew up, those communities, some of them are just disappearing. And the number one reason that they're disappearing is because the young people move away. There's no career opportunity, or they see it that way. Our industry has changed. We can live in the state where we grew up, and we can do a lot of work remotely, a lot of the work remotely once we're done shooting. But again, we have to track the production here first so that we can stay home and actually physically work on those productions.
Yeah.
But I think the time for Nebraska, you know, is right. We're recognizing not only the youth retention here, but the need for a diverse industry. We are an amazing agricultural state, but having one industry in a state doesn't keep youth here. You have to have multiple concepts, multiple industries, and the film industry is like a corporation in of itself. Every film, you know, you have all kinds of jobs. So I think that right now the state of Nebraska, our governor, our senators are really recognizing what film is. And part of our job has been, over these last 10 years, has been education. What is the film industry? What does it look like? Who gets hired? Why would the young people stay here instead of moving to California and New York? Because I think some of it is perception. You know, outside of our industry, it's perceived like, you know, California and New York are very glamorous places, right? But then we start seeing people move to Louisiana and move to Alabama and move to the states that, you know, that, let's just say, aren't so glitzy. So, you know, I think the understanding is becoming more grounded, and that people are understanding that they're not moving just for the glamour of it. They're moving because that's where the work is. So I think Nebraska's starting to kind of grasp the concept of what that looks like as well. And Nebraska is not the kind of state, we're not the kind of people that are very starstruck people. We respect people's privacy. You know, we're a humble group of people. And, you know, I still talk to people that I worked with 30 years ago on films that say, you know, Nebraska is one of their favorite places to film. So if we bring an incentive here now, you know, it's gonna be a lot really fast.
Well, then we've seen a lot of it change too, because I mean, there's always the joke nobody can afford to produce in LA anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I thought like Atlanta would have become what it is, or now Tulsa, because their incentive has done so well, I never would have thought of Tulsa as a destination for film. But the incentive is making it that way. And I wish people could have experienced the energy of the day that we spent in Lincoln to feel that momentum of what this could be. And I think that was a really powerful thing. I know on the way back, Shelby and I talked about it a lot, and about what that energy is. And I don't know, I think the time's right too. I mean, don't you?
Oh, I completely agree. And, you know, speaking too from that perspective, we can do a lot of this work remotely. You don't have to be in New York or LA. I mean, I work remotely completely because I'm an animation producer. We can do all of that from our computers, remotely, wherever we need to be in the Midwest. And it's really special because I think it allows for students to be able to stay here and have those opportunities, and we don't have to travel outward. I mean, we can stay here, we can be close to family, we can be close to the things that really make us us. And it's something very special.
And have the financial benefit of principal being done here, the economic stimulation of the principal being done here. I mean, how do you beat that?
I love the point too that you made of, we aren't very starstruck people here. I mean, I think about Lady Gaga when she was, living half-time in Omaha, and she'd just walk down the streets in Old Market, and nobody would even question it. I mean, it's such a wonderful place for, to have these actors. Timothy Chalamet was here a couple years ago. Yeah. It's a place where they can go and they can feel like people, as opposed to having to go to film sets in LA. It's a lot more real, I think.
Yeah.
So getting into it, I would like to chat about exactly, we've kind of gone through students and everything else, and kind of what we were talking about there, but who exactly would benefit from the incentive?
So I think that I'd like to start with one of the questions that we get asked, and you guys heard this at the hearing too, is one of the questions that was brought up is return on investment. What does the return on investment look like? And that's so complicated. When Kayleen Carlson, she and I wrote the incentive, and then our team, who you've met, Dana and Ishma and Randy and Kirk, we all got together, we reviewed it, worked with Kevin Shand, who's a former film commissioner who works at consulting. He kind of reviewed it for us. When we went out there to try to answer that question, there's studies that come out from the Motion Picture Association, and there's papers that come out. But when you start to try to look for return on investment, it's almost impossible to find. So Kayleen and I went and we dug through all of these studies, and we pulled up some information and put it together in one sheet. And it's actually 20 pages long. It's crazy. But what we did was we took state by state, and we looked at their incentive program, and we looked at their return on investment. But when you look at return on investment, you have to look at what your markers are and what you're measuring. So some states, their construction business is their marker. That's what they're measuring. Other states are measuring, how many jobs were created, or how many, like construction, when I say that, how many studios are built. Others are looking for return on investment tourism. What kind of tourism did it bring to the state? So one of the things that, again, Nebraska has learned as us as a team is that the more markers we have, the more measurements we have, is going to be the more of the possibility of being able to say who benefits from this. Because if you're looking at all of those areas, you're going to be able to see the increase very quickly. But one of the things that happened early on with film incentives is, they were very focused on certain areas that they were trying to build. And once those areas are built, then they look at redefining their incentives. So again, we benefited from all of that. So our goal with this return on investment document is to show what areas actually benefit, who benefits from those areas. So the more markers we have, the more likely we're going to be able to see the real impact for Nebraska and who really did benefit. So I would say cast and crew. I would say production companies that build in Nebraska. Small businesses. Students that are going to be able to do internships. We're looking at working with the DED for Intern Nebraska, and really for them to recognize that film is a great opportunity for internships as well. So I think that economic development will obviously benefit rural communities. One of our goals is that with this LB 840 that we have in Fremont, it was the first film incentive that was officially written and put in place. But we can duplicate that throughout all of the LB 840 communities within Nebraska. And what that does is it's an uptick. So if a production company comes to Nebraska and they get a great incentive from the state, if they come to one of our rural communities that have LB 840, they can get upticks. So they're going to get, let's just say free production space, or even if they want a rebate, whatever local spends they have, they can get 30% back on their local spend. So up to, whatever's in the pot. So each rural community that has LB 840 will also get these incentives, and to attract production companies to shoot in those rural communities. But like Fremont specifically, we have free production space. We have lofts and lodging. Of course, we want them to the crew to stay in the hotels, because that's where our LB 840 is, replenished from. But we do have loft apartments that we have donors that donate those apartments. And there's just so many other benefits. We call them soft incentives, but really, incentives that are on top of the big state incentives.
Yeah. I think, too, that it really helps us level the playing field with other places. And that's something, too. And just thinking about what it's like scouting locations. And, I mean, it's going to be invaluable. One last thing, and Stacy, we don't want to keep you all night, but can you tell us where we are in the process of possibly getting a bill passed? Where are we?
So we have unofficially heard that that we're going to be voted onto the floor, which means that out of committee, which is the furthest that an incentive has ever gotten in the state of Nebraska. So we're very happy about that. As soon as we get the official notice, we'll let everyone know, and then we go to debate it, on the floor with all of the senators. Our job is education. We've been educating senators from day one, supplying them with as much information as possible. Again, this return on investment is very important to a lot of senators, so we want to make sure that we've answered all of those questions as much as possible. We met with the Department of Economic Development to make sure that they know that we have assistance for training and education, a consultant that would come in. And we want to make sure that we have all of those, bases covered, for when it does happen. So we hope to answer most of the questions that the senators are going to have before we actually get to the debate. And I think that I just feel like, I think the hesitation that we're going to continue to see once we're on the floor will be the return on investment. Is it really beneficial to the state of Nebraska? And I think, for me, the number one answer to that will continue to be that our youth, retaining those youth in the state of Nebraska is critical. Bringing young professionals home to state is critical. So and film industry is a way to do that. It's another industry that will attract people to come back home and to their state, and they'll also stay here. Why wouldn't they, if they could?
Oh, absolutely. Well, we thank you so much, Stacy, for coming on the show. We just really appreciate it. And I think everyone's really appreciates all of the hard work that everyone has put into this, especially you and everyone at the dig site and all the folks that have been involved. So we're really excited, and we're crossing our fingers over
Yes.
hoping
Yeah.
everything goes through.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's going to be great, and we'll just have everyone back, and have everyone just keep rallying and just have answers to questions. The more we understand, like these podcasts, things like that, it really educates our industry too, because not everyone in our industry really wants to know or needs to know what an incentive means to the state. But if we all have the answers to the questions, then we have more of a chance.
yeah, absolutely. Well, this is going to conclude this episode. So we're going to see everybody in a couple of weeks with another exciting episode. So again, thank you, Stacy, for being here, and we'll see everybody in a couple of weeks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Depth of Field, and check us out on YouTube and Spotify, where we post new episodes every 2 weeks.